Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm so glad if you're joining us live. I'm so happy to have you. Really excited to bring you Frank Martinez today. It has been an interesting week with folks that were scheduled, and I got to do something to make sure that we've got somebody on the calendar that we keep to it. That being said, Frank is lined up here, and I'm really eager to jump into his story. Frank Martinez, I didn't get a lot of chance to interact with him while he was in the program, but I saw all of the beautiful pictures of the choreography and the dancing, and he has pursued that. So I'm really excited to introduce you to Mr. Frank Martinez. Hey, Frank.
Hi there.
So talk to us a little bit about what you're doing right now. Obviously, I know you just graduated, but talk to us about the school that you attended, about I know we're just talking about this before we jumped on live about around graduation. So how did they work that out, and what you're working on now? And then we'll kind of go back in time to the Randolph experience. But I also like to know what you want people to take away from this interview. So if you can just hit two notes for me, one, kind of what you're up to right now, so people know where you are in life right now, and what you want people to kind of take away from this interview. I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, so as you had mentioned, I just graduated from the new school. I graduated with my bachelor's in contemporary dance. And in terms of what I'm about to do and what I'm going to do, I'm lined up to be enrolling in the Irish World Academy for Music and Dance, which is in Limerick, Ireland. And
that's awesome.
That's sort of on pause right now, as is with everything else. But given what I've done at the new school and having completed 6 internships by now, I feel like I'm in a position to, even if everything else gets put on hold, I still have that professional experience to continue and join the workforce. I'm hoping as a marketing assistant of some kind to other dance companies. And let's see. Could you remind me what that second point was?
So I just wanted to kind of go over what you wanted people to sort of take away from this interview today. And I'm just throwing congratulations to you again. Frank just graduated from the new school, class of 2020, and maybe didn't get to do the live in-person thing, but this is a pretty impressive photo to sort of cap off the education there. So congratulations again on that. So yeah, just tell us kind of what is the overriding message that you'd like folks to sort of take away from our time here today?
Oh, yeah. So the overriding message that I want to communicate to everyone who's watching and tuning in is that you're worth more than you think you are. And that doesn't have to be a monetary value set to your name or something sentimental necessarily. It's just that you have to keep this in mind as you're continuing and going through hard times like this. When you're not getting job replies or you're not getting accepted into these colleges, you're still worth more than what you think that these schools are saying, these jobs are saying. And if you keep that in mind, then things might work out in your favor, which is how it worked out for me. Having been declined to a couple of schools before finally setting into the new school was a pretty rough time. But as soon as I had gone accepted on a full ride at that, I started noticing that, okay, well, this school is saying that I'm worth this much to them and that they want me to join them. Let me see what I can do to surpass that. And that's sort of the ride that I've been on so far.
I love that. I think one of the things that's really interesting, about the world today is that we have an amazing opportunity, amazing platform, sort of getting into this just before we jumped on live too, just this idea that, you can demonstrate your art form to the world. So if you're a high school student, at home right now, and I know I have parents complaining to me about, my folks aren't, doing too much. They're sitting there playing games. And one thing that we've been doing is just getting the kids out and moving in the morning. So anybody that's sort of stuck in home, a way to shift the mental attitude is getting moving. I have a feeling that, Frank, you don't have that issue, that you stay moving pretty often and easily. But I think, a lot of folks, they may be sedentary. You get sedentary, things start hurting. The mental thing isn't where you need to be. So we're getting the kids out in the morning. But to the students that are listening to this, just to sort of piggyback on your message, this idea that, right now really can be a huge opportunity for you to do whatever you love doing and follow your passion and put it out there for folks. I talk about on my business development channel all the time, like LinkedIn and TikTok being two places that, the organic reach of the content that you're putting out can really get out there. I have a high school friend, somebody that I went to high school with just a few weeks ago. They didn't have 100,000 people following them on TikTok, not even close to that. And now there's over 100,000 people following them on TikTok. So there's just an amazing way if you're consistent with it, if you're putting stuff out. And she's not a dancer, she's doing like comedy. Right. So whatever it is, whatever your thing is, whether it's art, whether it's business, whether it's video games, whether it's whatever, there's an audience out there for you. And, you're too young to know of this, but when I went to high school, we couldn't just lift the cell phone up, and broadcast there to the rest of the world. That was not a possibility. And now it is. So just understanding, even though there's all of these challenges and yes, it sucks. And I know we were talking about like Broadway shows shutting down, which, I was just talking to my son. He's an artistic kid, loves art. We've had a lot of conversations about Hamilton and, even if we had the money, right. When's that opportunity gonna pop up? How distant in the future is that goal or dream pushed off? But that being said, what can we do right now to sort of push towards that? Because if you want money, you got to get out there and demonstrate your art form. And then, I got my 9-year-old working on selling baseball cards. So I know there's a big, long tangent and I want to focus on you, but I just think that's a message that people need to hear to piggyback on your theme, that you're worth more than you think you are. You have a book within you. I just met a 17-year-old. He wrote a book on investing. There's a book in all of us. Your experience is incredibly valid. The things that you're going through, there's other people going through it, and they would love to hear about it. They'd love to watch the video. They'd love to hear the song. They'd love to read the book. So put it out there and do it. All right. I'm going to shut up. All right. Frank, talk to us about, you're in where did you go junior high?
Mott Hall Middle School, which is about 2 blocks. Yeah.
That's a big feeder for Randolph, right? All right. So you're in Mott Hall. Where are you living at that time?
Still the same place now, Harlem.
Harlem. All right. Beautiful. So you're in Harlem, you're going to Mott Haven. How does Randolph get on the radar? How does that end up being the place that you end up? And then walk us through that Randolph experience.
Yeah. Well, part of it is just because of the proximity to where I live and things like that. But the strange thing was whenever I was at Mott Hall Middle School, they made us take a dance class that would culminate in a performance. And that performance happened in Randolph. And that, for me, just put Randolph on my radar. And from there, I just sort of had it in the back of my mind. A lot of my other middle school friends were doing specialized, like the SHSATs and getting ready to go to private schools and stuff like that. But I definitely saw things in Randolph that stood out to me. They had a swimming team. I didn't know it at the time, but I knew that they had some sort of college preparedness. And I say that because I didn't know about CCPI until I think my second year in high school. But that sort of was my journey into Randolph, just physically being next to it, but also having a chance to actually explore the building as it is now.
Very cool. Yeah. So I think that's pretty common. I mean, any given time at Randolph, there's like 14 to 1,600 students. So a lot of kids, if you asked what, soundbusiness.org or SBI or CCPI is, all these different letters that represent what we were doing in the school, they'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And maybe they might know about May show or December show or maybe something else, but really that was usually the thing, right? So how did what did you think of the building as you were walking in, and what was your experience as you were walking the hallways? Did you have like a favorite class, favorite place in the building? Was there anything that you hated about Randolph? And walk us through the experience.
Yeah. So I specifically remember entering Randolph before all of the scaffolding and all of these cover-ups that they put in for construction happening. And the big hype, to say, is that it looked like a castle, and that sort of made me feel better about going to the school. As time passed by, I also saw that there were students that were taking classes that were above their grade, me coming from Mott Hall, it was an advanced middle school, so I had already taken living environment and algebra. Being put in those forward classes also gave me an advantage later on, but I'll get to that. And yeah, when I first entered Randolph, my goal was to go into the medical field. And obviously that didn't happen, but it didn't happen because one day in freshman year, Brianna Garcia, who was the captain, well, soon to be captain of Sisters, the step team, had asked me to go to this show. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll try. And this was the year that I believe CCPI had put on the Michael Jackson major show. And that was a huge production, and it stayed with me. That was
one of the best shows that I think we ever did. Yeah, that was just a wonderful show, very thematic. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, and for me, something came inside of me and said, I want to be on that stage. And the year after, I had joined the tech crew, which also plays into what I do now, because as someone who's a choreographer, I want to work with creative technology, well, specifically for performance practices, which could mean projections and things of that nature, or lighting and sound, but playing with it in an abstract way. And jumping back into my time at Randolph, it still sticks by me. The times that I would go into the CCPI room, which is probably one of my favorite rooms, because I hung out there a lot, right next to Thompson's office, where we had all of the laptops set up and these college posters that made me feel excited to go on and move on with my academic life. And let's see. Oh, I also remember some of my favorite days being career day. And I remember you had taught one of them, actually, that had to do with your online presence and keeping up with your online brand, the way that you're making
me feel real good right now by remembering that. I think some people might have wanted to forget it, so I appreciate you remembering.
No, yeah, I definitely, it still stuck with me, which is why my Facebook profile is on lock, while my LinkedIn, my Instagram, my Twitter is all available. And I do that because I know that some of the things that I share on Facebook are pretty fun, not necessarily all that serious. But when I'm on Instagram, I know that I'm putting myself out there, and that is how future employers or future schools would get to me. So yeah, it definitely stuck out to me. Career day, little seminar.
It's a wonderful thing, and it's sort of weird right now because I'm getting more out there because I'm doing a couple of live programs, these interviews included, and it's an interesting thing. Like, I'm in the business world and I'm networking, and there's some people that prefer to connect on Facebook, and then there's some people that prefer to connect on LinkedIn. So having these different channels and knowing how to work them is really important. So you're in Randolph, you got excited with the SBI stuff. What was that, sophomore year, or?
I joined sophomore year, yeah.
Okay. So walk us through that sophomore year into junior year. Junior year is a big, important year. What's going on?
Yeah. Junior year was when I had really started to get into the pressures of what am I going to do for the rest of my life? even though looking back now, I know that things changed drastically. And as you continue with your academic experience, you yourself are going to change. I remember junior year, I had gone to a couple of college trips outside of SBI, and these were schools like Columbia or Hunter, and that sort of put the stress on me to think back and think, well, I could have taken these steps to make sure that my transcript looked better, to have at least a little more experience performing outside of Randolph. But looking back on my whole junior year experience, being worried about what my transcript would say, definitely put me on track so that I could focus on my undergraduate career and getting ready to get into my graduate studies. So it definitely was a little bit too late for me to think about that in junior year because my grades were already at a certain point. And
did you have really good grades, or there was rough patches? What was going on?
Oh, I was pretty average. Yeah.
Pretty average.
Just to put that out there, but I was still involved.
I think there's a challenge, because you're either, high school separates you, filters you out, shifts you through whatever. Like there's, folks that just really aren't applying themselves, or they have difficulties for one reason or another. You got your high achievers, they got mom and dad at home, or, whatever the situation is, they're pushed and they're driven and they're on the high honor roll. And I've seen it. It's so weird because I've seen some high school students where it's like, are you even trying? And they're on the high honor roll, right? It's different for everybody. So I think, when you talk about, my grades weren't really maybe where I might have wanted them to be. They weren't horrible. I mean, so many people find themselves in that for lots of different reasons. What do you think the reason was that you weren't like, high honor roll? What was holding you back?
Part of it was a lack of motivation, but the other part was I was going through stuff at home. And this is a story with a lot of low-income students that come to Randolph.
Yeah,
they have lots of other things to worry about on top of their classes. And
I think if you don't mind, because just going on your theme, what you're going through, probably somebody else is going through. You talked to Hassan Rose, who was dealing with things. He's an amazing guy. You got to go and check him out. Hassan Rose. He's a physical fitness trainer right now. Gains Fitness. Guy is like, should be in a movie with The Rock. Like I say it every time, but it's just super impressive. But he was dealing with things, and I think for one reason or another, he's going through trauma, and he isn't being looked after by parents, by the school, and you slip through, right? And there's things that just aren't covered. So yeah, talk to us about your story.
Yeah, for me, it was basically a physical condition that I was going through that ended up taking a toll on my mental health, and I think my mental health was the main factor in not being able to gain motivation. I was diagnosed with depression. There was so many things going on in my home life. But as I continued to go into school, I had also put myself inside these college readiness programs, not just CCPI. I was also captain with the swim team. At some point, I was on the track team. I did the anime club for a while. And
that's amazing. So you had a nice high school resume. Very cool. So talk to us about that. You did the anime?
I was in the anime club for a while. I was on the track team.
Swimming, track team.
Yeah.
And this is all during junior year?
This was throughout high school. Junior year, I was, I think, centrally involved with CCPI.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And junior year was also the year that I had interned at CCNY at a laboratory, because that was whenever I was still inside the mindset of like science is what I want to do. And I think that internship during summer going into senior year was also a big push on my applications, aside from being an intern for CCPI my senior year.
Yeah, I think that's important because we're going to get into a part of the story that's coming up. So, all right, senior year, you're applying. Talk to us about what happened.
Yeah, there was a lot of pressure going on at home for me to pick a school that one, didn't cost too much, and two, would have a liberal arts program specifically so that I could continue taking science classes and then dabble in dance. And this was at a point in my life where I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was still hanging on to that science part of me that really just wants to do cool stuff in the future. But senior year was a little harder just because of that. Because with Thompson, he was talking to us about going to private schools and going to residential colleges. But I was discouraged because, being a first gen student, you don't have anybody else's experiences to go off of. And as I continued with CCPI my senior year, I started learning more that, it's possible. You can come from a background where the estimated family contribution is 0, and you can still gain a meaningful experience at a city school or at a school upstate. I was going to skip forward and talk about my time in New School, but
we can go on. Talking about your background, because I know you said you're first generation. Where are your parents from, and who's with you in the house and all that? Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So both of my parents are immigrants from Mexico.
My wife is, I don't know if you know this, but my wife is from Mexico, and we spent a good deal of time. So where are they from in Mexico?
Yeah, my parents are from Cuernavaca, Morelos, which is right below the capital, Distrito Federal.
Yeah. So where we're from, my wife is from Huejotzingo, Puebla. So if you know
Puebla.
You know where Puebla is, right? It's about and then I remember from the bus ride, it's like an hour to Cholula, and then another 40 minutes to. Anyways, but it's not too far. It's within hours of where you're talking about, I think. Yeah. All right, cool. So they're from there, and do you have a big family, brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I'm a middle child. My older brother is about a year and a half older than me, and my younger brother, I think, is 11 years younger.
Oh wow. Okay. What did your brother end up doing?
He ended up going to SUNY Maritime.
Okay.
And he's currently pursuing civic engineering.
That's awesome. That's very cool. All right. So talk to us. So you got accepted to the new school. You get this kind of full ride piece. We talked about the financial piece of it. So now you graduated. So how much do you owe now?
About $7,000 in loans for the entire 4 years.
Which is pretty good, I gotta say, to come out of it, because usually, people will say full ride, but they'll include the loans that they're talking about in that, and that is not what I would call full ride, because that means you're gonna have to pay money back. Full ride sort of talks about it's a debt-free education, but $7,000 for lodging is not a bad deal after 4 years at a pretty top end school. So talk to us about you got admitted to new school. You're in the city now. One of the things that we do talk about in SBI a lot is go out of the city, go out of the city. Obviously, you stayed in the city. You had a good deal in the city, which makes sense. Stay in the city, right? How was it? Because imagine, so you paid for lodging, so you actually lived on campus. You didn't live at home.
I lived on campus semesters at a time. This was normally the spring semester. And that was mainly just because I wanted to focus on my finals. There were lots of things going on at home and lots of distractions.
That sounds smart. That sounds really smart, because it's one of the things, that's one of the reasons we're saying to people, go out, because you don't want to be distracted by home life, girlfriends, boyfriends, all the craziness that can be at home. So that's really cool. All right, so talk to us about. I'm going to let you go into it. So walk us through this new school experience.
Yeah, so the new school was pretty daunting at first, just because it's really this monster of a university, and I mean that in a good sense, but also acknowledging the fact that the new school is an umbrella for all of these schools: Eugene Lang College, Parsons School for Design. There was also a bachelor's degree program for adults. There was PhD graduate students. It's pretty big looking back on it. And when I first entered, I was entering with people who didn't have the same background and experience for me, save for the people in my program, the HEOP program, which is probably the sole reason I was able to go to the new school. And I say this because it was a unique experience in the sense that whenever I would enter in a classroom, I would either be the only person of color inside,
Right.
I would be the only person from New York inside, New York State, or I would be the only person from the country in that class. And
wow,
that was a unique experience because whenever I talked to my classmates who ended up going to CUNY schools, they found people from around the block. They found people who were from another borough, whereas I was having to speak to people.
Talked about some of the folks, some of your peers from 2016. So where were some of your friends at in their different spots? Talk to us about that. I want to hear more about the new school experience, but I'd love to know who you were talking to and sort of comparing experiences with.
Yeah. Some of them were family friends, but the main people that I spoke to were the same people who were also in CCPI. Rosa Noesi, who is my best friend, she went to SUNY New Paltz, and that's a few hours upstate. And her experience was about the same in the sense that she was either the only person of color or the only person from the city inside her classes. And, you know, hearing about her experience with getting locked out of her dorm room or having to run from a gang of squirrels definitely put it into perspective that my experience with going to school in the city was different than theirs, but that also they're getting an education that is still relevant to their life and their career aspirations.
Who is the person that was getting chased by squirrels? We want to definitely send this video to them.
It was mainly just stories. I know people at SUNY Geneseo that definitely talked about the gangs of the squirrels. But yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, so keep going on your new school experience. So freshman year, how did you cope? How did you deal with it? And I went to Eugene Lang College. Now there was more local people, I gotta say, in Eugene Lang, but I remember many classes of the black girl in the class or black woman in the class feeling like, you know, I have to explain my point of view and where I'm coming from. So I definitely ran into that. And I was a member of Langueros, the Latin student. And no, I'm not Latin. It just sort of rubbed off on me. But I just happened to be a part of that group while we're in there. And I remember just us advocating on behalf of just students in general and diversity and all of these different things that the new school seems to perpetually, I think, have a challenge with, especially hearing your story. So talk to us, how did you cope with it? How did you deal with it freshman year, moving into sophomore and on?
Yeah. The main, I guess, backbone to my experience was being a part of the HEOP program. And just for people who are watching, the HEOP program is basically a program where students get admitted into these colleges who don't necessarily meet the criteria academically, but have enough background experience and have enough reasoning to be attending these schools so that they receive extra funding, extra peer mentoring. And the peer mentoring that I received from the HUP program definitely made everything so much easier because everyone who had gone accepted through that program had similar experiences and had already gone through a couple of classes where there were diversity issues, and not just in the racial sense and the racial disparities that took place inside of that institution, but diversity in terms of like background and the level of education that they've had. Part of me transitioning into college, I didn't just have a normal dance college experience because Lang likes to make you do so much reading and so much writing, and I was not at that level. But through the HEOP program, I had a peer mentor and I had sort of a writing tutor that I would go to that helped me get up to that level so that I wouldn't fall behind academically.
Hmm.
And definitely those sorts of opportunity programs are there to put in place to help these students with backgrounds. And that was sort of what allowed me to continue. Moving forward, I had initially entered as a liberal arts student. I didn't, which was basically an undeclared major. But after a while, I decided to go into the interdisciplinary science program, and I ended up working in the lab for the entirety of my freshman year. But at the same time, I was able to take.
Working in the lab, what does that mean?
Oh yeah, so I was a research assistant for the university science labs.
Oh, very cool.
And that was basically acting as a TA for students who don't know how to use equipment, or helping inside the classroom for other science students. But as I kept on taking these science classes and these liberal arts classes where I had to write so much, I was also able to take ballet contemporary performance class. And at some point, I realized that because I was at the new school, I had so much opportunity to study dance, but at the same time, take classes in other areas. And that sort of made me comfortable with making the switch of doing dance full time, because at the same time, I was taking these intro to technology classes where I learned how to use camera. I learned how to code. I know how to use Photoshop, Premiere, After Effects. And those were just sort of the normal classes that I took, aside from my dance classes, because of the nature of the school being able to take classes in more than one area.
So now people can reach out to you to completely do their music videos, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, you get a lot. I mean, that sounds like you did a lot and you have a lot to share. I wonder if do you have some like visual projects that you created?
I have my senior thesis that I could share. That one I spent a lot of time working with.
So what was your senior thesis and how did that come about? Like, how did you choose that whole thing? Now I think we're going to walk through, and you were doing work study at the new school, being in the middle of Manhattan, obviously, it has its advantages, right? You were meeting a lot of people. So what was it like? And what was it like doing the dance classes? Because this is a life that I know not much about. And I know this is your passion. So talk to us about that, like the experience of taking these, high-end dance classes at the new school.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting because we aren't a traditional program. We don't necessarily just do modern dance, ballet, or contemporary. We had a background in postmodernism and avant-garde dance. And that was sort of a shock coming into the school, because my first time sitting in a performance, a student performance, there were people like shoving eggs in their mouth or doing like facial expressions to the audience, and I hadn't come in contact with that sort of dance. And that sort of laid the foundation for me understanding that I was about to get an education in dance that was unique, because I was also applying theoretical concepts that challenges notions of traditional dance. I'm sorry, you're going to say something?
I was just going to say, that sounds weird.
Yeah.
not weird. And you came from working with Ricky doing like modern on the stage. So there's a lot of like movement, with sound, not necessarily with words. Going back to that Michael Jackson performance, I mean, one of the best things I've ever seen, and Ricky's done just one beautiful performance after another. But I think that was the one with like the newspapers and all that jazz. And I mean, talk about artistry. So you're walking in a new school and they're shoving eggs in their mouth. That's a little bit different. So can you talk to us a little bit about the different art forms and what you liked and maybe what you were like, that wasn't for me?
Yeah. Speaking of which, my academic path was also weird, because as I mentioned, I started off as a science major and then ended up dance. But along the way, I had also tried to do the BA/BFA program, which was basically you would be a Eugene Lang student, but you would also be a Parsons student. And with that, I was going to do my BFA in fine arts and my BA in dance. And as I was taking these Parsons classes, there there was sort of a culture that I wasn't used to, particularly working with different like mediums that I hadn't come in contact with yet as an artist, or well, a visual artist at that time.
Are you talking about Adobe, or are you talking about other stuff?
Other stuff. I think Adobe came pretty easy to me just because I really like computer stuff.
Okay.
And
Adobe does not come easy to everybody. So that, add that as a checkbox, like, oh, wow. All right. Speaks to Frank Martinez. He can do Adobe. That's awesome.
Yeah, that I'm really grateful to have been able to learn from those Parsons classes. But it also put into perspective that this was a 5-year program, and I was having to choose between would I take this dance class or would I take this art history class? And that sort of just made me take a step back and be like, okay, well, I'm doing these things, and Parsons is like the #1 current school for art and design in the country. But I really think that my choice was to stay in dance was basically I wanted to devote myself to this craft. And because I had started thinking about dance in a theoretical way and learning about how dance has its own barriers, has its own histories that need to be modeled, that's sort of just how I came to that conclusion.
All right, cool. And so what was it that you were really enjoying about the dance classes? Because obviously you said you moved from the BFA and doing things at Parsons to kind of moving away from that and into the dance. So what excited you and engaged you with the dance program?
I think it was just the fact that I had come into contact with a lot of I'm not sure moments, because like I said, during my first dance class, my first performance class, I would say, we had practiced doing facial exercises and just making ourselves look weird. And I thought, well, do I really want to do this? And those not sure moments made me more interested in dance as an art form, because my initial thoughts as dance was like New York City Ballet is at the pinnacle of everything. Ballet is this and that. But then when you start learning about the histories that come into contact with how dance played a role, not only in American history, but played a role in being reflective of human culture, and how there's a lot of discriminatory practices in dance and elitism that sort of models the outside world. And those were the not sures that I had come in contact with and that were being talked about in my theory classes, but were also being applied in my dance seminar classes. Whenever we had taken contemporary dance, I think I actually took every contemporary dance other than some of the ones that couldn't fit in my schedule. But just thinking about how contemporary as a word in itself is very broad. There's not just one way to do contemporary dance, like what you would see.
As you're explaining it, I'm like, you're saying contemporary, and I'm like, well, I hope you put some more detail into it, because I have no idea what you're talking about, right? I mean, the specifics of, because is contemporary dance hip hop dance? Is it modern? Is it some of these Latin styles of dances that are new? Like, what is it? Or does it encompass all of that?
That's the thing about it. Contemporary as a definition is just anything that's recent and anything that is working towards something new. So my contemporary, when I had first started taking these classes, I had the idea that contemporary was like lyrical and what you would see on So You Think You Can Dance. And as I kept taking these classes, I had these teachers who were taking in dancers from the African diaspora, from the Latin diaspora, who I had also gone a teacher that did hip hop inside this contemporary dance class. And this is all working towards understanding that contemporary in itself has other forms and can be in other forms. And yeah.
So how did you come to the conclusion that you wanted to be a choreographer?
Oh, I knew that since I was in Randolph.
Okay. So why the journey through like the science major? Did you just want to have another skill set?
That, but then also I was still in the mindset that the arts are probably the worst things you can do in terms of finances. And I wanted to do it so that my parents would be happy with what I was doing in school. But
Yeah. What do you think about that now? Do you feel like you can't earn a living through the arts?
my perspective definitely shifted. It's still hard. I'm not gonna lie. I know about the different troubles that await for me after I'm done with grad school. But seeing all these professionals and talking to all these people inside these classes, having a career in the arts doesn't necessarily just mean being in studio full time. And that's sort of how I came to taking so many internships, because I knew that there was a business side to being a dancer. There was a marketing side where you have to brand yourself and you have to think about which auditions you have to go to, or even just maintaining your online presence and building a website. There's so many facets to approach having an arts career, and part of that is supporting other artists. But then you're, as an artist, you're not bound to a single art form, and that's sort of what drew me into it.
Well, this is the thing that I'm going to say to it, because right now, if you're going for certain careers, now, college educated folks, folks that are going in master's degrees for like engineering, but even somebody that's going like for a law degree or a nursing degree, if they think they're going to walk out of school and not be faced with competition from automation, robotics, technology in general, like they're going to be in for a rude awakening. Like you're walking into a world where you're either going to, sort of understand the environment and work with it or not. And the same is true for artists, right? You can't just expect to walk out of school and your career to be laid out in front of you. Technology is a big part of it. Social media is a big part of it. Like if you want to land a part in a Broadway play, or you want to be a choreographer for the next hot video or production, half of what people are looking at you for is how many people are following you on, whatever platform, what does your IMDb say? What is, all that kind of stuff. So, I encourage artists to understand that, because, and this is sort of the hot take. This is the sort of the beneficial thing of being an artist right now. All the money is in creative.
Yeah.
Right. Now you have to understand the business side of it. Right. So, if I'm an artist and I'm painting paintings, but I don't understand how to sell the painting, the money's going to come from the painting, but that money may not stay with the artist. Right. It's going to be the people that understand how to sell the art and are the middlemen, and then they're going to take all the money. But if you're the artist and you own the intellectual property and you understand the business side of it, hello, here comes the dollars, right? That's the way it is. So understanding those components of it, and hopefully they gave you some of that at New School in terms of the business side of it. Did they go into that at all?
No, yeah, we definitely learned about how to approach nonprofits and how to approach grant writing. That is a skill that allowed me to land other internships in non-for-profit companies that didn't have to do with dance. And understanding where this money comes from is also important. I get, at least in my perspective, thinking about all of the art institutions inside the city that have private owners and get funds from the government. A huge part of being an artist is understanding where is that money coming from, and understanding that we're in a different place than artists were 20 years ago, with the National Endowment of the Arts being very little. The average American taxpayer pays about 75 cents for the arts as a whole, and this grant money also gets distributed by people who have a huge background and don't necessarily know who to talk to. So getting that background in how to market yourself and presenting yourself, and also understanding that to have that writing background to be able to communicate your sorts of abilities and your ideas is really important.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. and I know that, you know, on the SBI side of things, because what you're talking about is like that money for nonprofits and, you know, government funding and that sort of thing. And I was just speaking with a gentleman that's, you know, very passionate about education. He's got partners in different types of projects down in Florida. His name is Kyle Christian Steele, and he talked about sort of this lean canvas model. So I'll try to post that in the stream. But this idea that whatever you're doing, arts, nonprofit, whatever, but understanding that there's things that you can make money off of. I mean, everything from, and it can be very hard to reach. Like, you know, I'm posting up YouTube videos, but I don't know when, if ever, I'll ever see any income from, you know, YouTube views, although it's not something that I'm opposed to if they want to hand me some money, optimize videos, all that kind of stuff. But business in terms of like, you know, you're doing choreography, and you can put together, you know, courses, and you can put that up on Teachable. You know, if you want it to look nice, you can go on to Fiverr and get somebody to design the way the thing looks. It's not that complicated, but you need to understand that those opportunities are there so that you can take advantage of it. And when you build out these products, you can then fund the art side of it. And then on the other end of that, everything that's technology based, I mean, you know, everything from the AirPod video where they got somebody dancing in the video, right? That's art. That's commercial art. So placing yourself in that position, because they don't get to sell the science, they don't get to sell just about anything these days without some kind of wrapping context for society, right? And it's the artists that are putting that all together. Even looking at Steve Jobs and, you know, him ordering courses in topography and all that kind of stuff to make sure that things look the right way, to be able to sell, you know, what they're selling. So the artistry is so important, and really is the access into the dollars, because you know, making things and the competition to make things is there, but the artistry and making it look good and feel good, that's what people put their money behind. So you're well positioned for that. All right, so tell us about senior year. Obviously, you know, we're dealing with some stuff. You just graduated. Talk to us about that experience and what you're doing now.
Yeah. So definitely not the graduation experience that I was waiting for. I'm also kind of sad that I didn't have my final performance, didn't get to show a live thesis performance. But now that I'm sort of in this position where I've graduated, I know that I'm going to grad school in the fall. Well, at least that's the current plan, depending on how borders open up. But I'm sort of in a position.
How did the Ireland thing, Limerick, Ireland, right? That's where
Yeah.
you had. How did that happen? You're like burying the lead, dude. Like how do you make, you know, traveling? We're just talking to my son, you know, we went out for lunch today. Said I want to travel the world. I've never been overseas. I'm so jealous of you. Congratulations. You're headed at some point or another over to Limerick Island. How did that connection happen?
Yeah. It was sort of a weird route that I took, finally putting in my deposit for Ireland, because I was originally set to move to California. I had gotten into Cal State University, Long Beach, for the MFA in dance, and that was where I was going to. I had already bought a hoodie for them, had already paid my housing deposit, but they, the financial aid with them made it so that I had to choose between waiting another year or just choosing another school. So that's where I ended up thinking, well, I was choosing this school because, one, they were able to pay for me at the time, and two, because, well, this is a good program and that I want to be in part of it. So in thinking about
what's the attraction to the program? Why is it good? What attracted you to the program?
Yeah, so it's a really small program. They only accept about 4 students per year, and they also give these students office space, studio space. They get priority for concerts and things of that nature, and that was sort of what I was looking for inside my graduate school search. But after I had decided, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to go because of my finances. What are some of the alternatives? And something that's really popular amongst my peer group is thinking about going to schools in other countries because it's cheaper than going to school here, which is actually true for what I'm doing right now, going to school in Ireland. The original plan was to get my MFA in 2 years, but with Ireland, I would have the same kind of attention, the same kind of dedicated studio and practice space, but I would complete my MA in 1 year. I'm on an accelerated Toth program, and that really stood out to me. And so I just decided, okay, well, let me send in my materials, let me send in my application, see what happens. And that's sort of where I landed. I applied to some other schools. I had gone into University of Lincoln in London, or Sussex. Sorry, I'm confusing schools.
Yeah.
But and another school in the UK, University of Chichester. But I sort of didn't choose them because Limerick was also a cheaper city to be in, and also the balance between US dollars and euros compared to US dollars and pounds was a pretty staggering difference. But also, I had also studied abroad beforehand. I studied abroad in Scotland for 2 weeks and was able to travel throughout the country during that time period. And I also studied abroad in Ghana. And those two really put things into perspective that getting an international education and being in contact with these people really does make a difference in how you interact with the rest of the world and how you approach different situations.
That's awesome. All right, so I want to wrap this up. Remind us, kind of what your overall theme is here, and how can people get in touch with you if they want to work with you, congratulate you, just stay connected with you?
Yeah. Going back to, I guess, the takeaway that I want people to get from this is you're worth more than what you think you are worth, and your path may not be the same as everyone else's. And that's speaking from experience with going to one school and then not getting accepted into others, or even right now, what I just talked about with my graduate education, being set to go to one school and then having everything turned upside down and committing to a school halfway around the world. But yeah, I mean, I self-identify as a choreographer, but also as a screen dance filmmaker. I've had some of my dance films shown in 2 festivals so far. I'm waiting to hear back from others, but I guess those are in limbo just because of the pandemic that we're in.
Whatever you can post into the comments on this so that people can find it, and I'll try to make sure it goes, both to the YouTube and the to the Facebook feeds. This will live on here, so it'll be something else to add to your repertoire. Thank you so much, Frank, for doing this. Thank you for all you've done for SBI in the past. We hope that you'll stay connected with us, and I'm looking forward to the connections that are created with this. Hopefully people will reach out to you that haven't reached out to you for a while, and I've definitely noticed from putting videos up, it's like, oh, that this, people connect. So it's really great. Good luck in all your endeavors. If there's anything that you're posting, which I hope you are, posting stuff and putting stuff out there for people to consume, because what else are people doing right now, right? They're consuming stuff. So why not? Really look forward to seeing you and working with you in the future. I know you're in line for big things. Thank you. All right. Now I'm going to go interview Carolina Saavedra. She's a chef and another alumni, and we're going to get right into it in just a few minutes. Thanks, Frank.
All right. Thank you.